Welcome to Crossroads. The Chinese Communist Party is pushing for plans to mine the moon. Now, a new proposal from Chinese scientists would be to construct a magnetic launcher that would work as a transport system in order to establish an Earth-Moon economy. Now, South China Morning Post said this. They said Chinese scientists have proposed building a magnetic launcher on the moon to provide a cost-effective way of sending resources extracted from the lunar surfaces back to the Earth. It says the magnetic levitation facility would work on the same principle as the hammer throw in athletics, but rotating at an increased speeds before throwing the launch capsule towards the Earth. It says by taking advantage of the moon's unique environment, such as its high vacuum and low gravity, it would be able to eject payloads twice a day at around 10% of the cost of existing transport methods, according to researchers from the Shanghai Institute of Satellite Engineering. Now, further it states the proposed launch system would use a 50-meter, about a 165-foot, rotating arm and a high-temperature superconducting motor to launch capsules loaded with lunar resources. After 10 minutes, the rotating arm would reach the moon's escape velocity of 2.4 kilometers per second, about 1/6 of Earth's escape velocity, to put it on the correct trajectory to return to Earth. It says the system would be powered by solar and nuclear energy. This is important. And notes that with more than 70% of the energy recovered from each launch, thanks to a design that would allow kinetic energy to be converted back to electricity during the deceleration phase after the launch. Now look, they go on to mention that this would be part of their plans to develop space mining systems, aimed specifically at the moon to mine helium-3. And they said that would help address the Earth's energy crisis. They estimate the Earth has around 0.5 tons of helium-3, while the moon is estimated to have around 1 million tons, so a whole lot more. Now, this, of course, ties in with something else. There are growing ambitions for fusion energy. This is kind of the next generation of nuclear energy. Only rather than working on nuclear fission, which the current ones do, this is nuclear fusion. And although it's still hypothetical in a lot of ways, they haven't really been able to make it work. If they do make it work, that's the future of the world's energy. And if that works, they need helium-3. And because of that, the moon is seen as kind of the next frontier of mining because it has helium-3. Now, on the launch system itself, if the Chinese Communist Party were to build it, it would also mean the CCP would have to, as they mention, build solar and nuclear energy stations on the moon. They would have to build energy systems on the moon itself. Meaning, think about it, you'd have to have, of course, full-blown mining operations, which means systems to sustain the mining operations, meaning moon bases, unless they do it autonomously, systems to keep, again, humans surviving there, probably in large numbers, if not just a few of them just to maintain the systems. You would then have to have systems to transport it, systems to launch it, and systems to power the entire thing. And so this would mean the establishment of a full moon system. And the big question here is, well, who would own that? Who owns the moon? And if they were to build systems like this, they would have to establish, again, the entire infrastructure, the entire trade route. They would have to secure that trade route. They have to make sure that satellites or space shuttles or whatever else are not entering that, meaning they would be able to deny access to other countries looking to access that. And that, of course, is one of the big concerns for the United States. Because the concern with the CCP is its broader ambition to control what they call the cis-lunar system, the space between the Earth and the moon. And if the CCP can control that, well, they can weaponize that. Now, interestingly, the Chinese Communist Party is saying, these scientists at least, are suggesting that they work with Russia on this program. And they say this could be part of their ambitions to build a research station on the moon's south pole by 2035. And so, as along with this, again, there's an entire new competition, a new moon race taking place. Not over just who lands on the moon, but who owns the moon. Because whoever goes there and claims that they own a certain region of it, well, you're going to have to contest that. And if you want to contest, you might even have to fight for it. The Chinese Communist Party or the United States can claim, hey, we own this part, you own that part, or one of them can say we own the entire thing. And when it comes to the ambitions with this, there's a lot more to it. the Chinese Communist Party and Russia notably have other ambitions tied in with this. And what's important here is that this is not just a single ambition. There's other things tied in with this. The Chinese Communist Party right now is looking at the cislunar system, the moon. They're also looking at undersea areas, but they're also looking at something else, which is, of course, the Arctic. And both countries, Russia and China, are also moving with their ambitions there as well. Newsweek said this. They say China and Russia are looking to work more closely together in the Arctic, including in science. A senior Chinese official for the polar region said during a visit to a territory that is part of Norway, and a potential challenge, notably, to a NATO member. Now, the issue with the Chinese Communist Party aiming to carry out operations like this in the Arctic are actually similar to the ambitions with the moon and space and so on. It means they're going to be trying to claim this territory. And they call the Arctic, of course, one of the strategic high grounds, because if you were to launch ballistic missiles, if you were to launch air attacks against the United States, you'd probably go through the Arctic. But of course, it also ties into something else. They're trying to claim territory there. And they're doing this again under the guise of maybe mining for minerals, of doing oil wells and so on, of establishing an economy there. Because once you build an entire economic system, you have to have infrastructure to power it, meaning power stations. You have to have, of course, individuals there to run it. You have to have systems to sustain those individuals. And then you need something to defend it. And so the CCP, by establishing different areas like this, can build systems around it. Now, the concern over civil-military fusion ties in with this as well. The Chinese Communist Party, with its interests, again, whether it's the moon or the Arctic or even undersea, any kind of operation it carries out entails not just, again, business and science. That's also closely tied in with the CCP in both areas with its military. And notably, because they're doing this, it's aligning as well with this whole kind of great coupling taking place. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break. Welcome back. Scientific collaboration between the U.S. and China, it's on the decline. And as this happens, concerns over civil-military fusion and the Chinese Communist Party's interests in it are starting to get hit by the great decoupling now taking place. Now, Nature said this. They said China-U.S. research collaborations are in decline. This is bad news for everyone, according to them, right? They note further in that China's scientific collaboration with other countries has declined since the pandemic, driven by falling partnerships with the United States, and analysis shows. It notes that scientists have been warning that political tensions between China and the United States, combined with the pandemic, have affected research collaboration between the two countries. But it takes time for evidence of this sort of decline to accumulate in research databases, it says. Now, note that in 2022, the total number of papers co-authored by researchers from China and their international peers declined for the first time since 2013. It notes that one individual, Zhang, said that ongoing geopolitical tensions between the United States and China have also fueled the decline, saying, quote, "This is especially worrying for researchers." And notes that the U.S. Department of Justice's controversial China initiative, which was launched in 2018 to tackle espionage and the research industry, that ended in 2022. But notes the crackdown resulted in several scientists being arrested over their ties to collaborations or institutions in China. You might remember all these different researchers being charged as taking unregistered foreign gifts and so on. And that is also, it says, stoked fear among researchers of Chinese descent. And notes that since then, the U.S. government has adopted a range of policies focused on tightening research security. And in July of 2023, the Chinese government, the CCP, implemented its revised counter-espionage law, which broadened the definition of what constitutes spying, meaning the researchers are squeezed on both sides. Now, it notes the crackdown on perceived foreign interference in both the United States and China is making researchers more cautious about collaborating, according to this individual. Now, this is important because remember, there were a lot of controversies of these scientists and professors and so on taking undeclared gifts. You might remember at Harvard University and others, there were all these cases of different scientific labs and researchers and so on taking gifts from China. And the concern, of course, was that while they were working for the Chinese Communist Party, maybe unofficially because they were receiving some kind of compensation for their work with the CCP. You might remember another controversy. There was the issue, for example, of researchers, such as in the medical field, carrying out controversial research in China, things like gain-of-function research. And one of the concerns made in the United States was that some of these researchers and institutions are doing research they cannot legally do in the United States in China, that they're bypassing U.S. laws on different boundaries in the medical field by going to China and working in collaboration with the Chinese Communist Party, because there it's a free-for-all, right? In China, of course, you can do a lot of things that would be illegal here. And for a lot of researchers, that's become kind of one of the big benefits of going to China. They want that. And the crackdown on this and the exposure of it is making it harder for them to do that. Then there was one of the biggest problems. The U.S. taxpayers are funding research meant for U.S. innovation. Our tax money goes to some of this, including the universities and defense institutions. And the problem is some of those universities and institutions work with Chinese researchers. And that means because of that, some of the American universities or research groups getting this money, working with Chinese counterparts, well, it turned out that research being paid for by American taxpayers has been ending up in China, including in the Chinese military. The concern there is, of course, that we're bankrolling the Chinese Communist Party's research and development branches, that their own military is benefiting from and even fielding weapons against us that we paid for with our tax dollars because American universities are collaborating with Chinese universities or research labs. And this, of course, raises another big issue between, again, the business community, the scientific community, and government and defense. Because while scientists might say, hey, any collaboration is good collaboration, there's a lot of them who believe that. They don't see it as nefarious. A lot of them saying, hey, why not work with the people who know what they're doing? Why not try to do that? Well, the problem for governments is that they're paying for, again, defense research. They're paying for things that are supposed to benefit our country, and the things we're paying for end up harming us. And so on the political level and the defense level, this is having the opposite effect. It's as if we're bankrolling the Chinese military. Now, this type of research, of course, also benefits the Chinese Communist Party a whole lot more than it does the United States. The U.S. can go to a lot of other countries and work with them in different ways that do not harm us. But with the Chinese Communist Party, the things we're helping them build, ironically, the CCP is using to actively harm us. Now, the Chinese Communist Party is also looking to get around these kinds of issues where, again, there's a crackdown on this type of research by just trying to recruit foreign scientists to go and work in China. One of the big programs they have for this is the 1,000 Talents program. Another one is the Torch program. And the CCP is actually going beyond this. Now, those two programs notably work as a kind of talent recruitment system. There's some legal gray areas with how the Chinese Communist Party does this, especially, again, when you have U.S. researchers getting U.S. grant money, oftentimes from U.S. taxpayers, and they take their research and just hitch off to China and then give it to them. That is, of course, kind of one of the gray areas that could be considered espionage or economic theft, depending on how they do it. The Chinese Communist Party has active programs trying to do that. In fact, they even state a lot of these things publicly. But the CCP is now working on another one. They're just offering now residency to some of these individuals. South China Morning Post said this. They said China is considering changing the immigration system to attract more foreign scientists, including offering permanent residency. They note in a resolution published after the recent third plenum that the Chinese Communist Party hopes to, quote, improve the support mechanisms for recruiting talent from overseas and create internationally competitive personnel systems. And notes that in a written document released at the time, President Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, said the country's innovation capacity falls short of the requirements for high-quality development and warned it is too reliant on key and core technologies controlled by others. Now, I mentioned before, one of the big things that came out of this recent top-level meeting of the Chinese Communist Party was they want to essentially replace every single thing in China that has any component tied to the United States or the West in general. That means every single piece of software. That means your operating systems, your Word documents, up to like the systems used to control electronics and big factories and so on. All that software, all the chips, all the computers, all the cars, every single thing needs to be replaced with Chinese systems. They are pushing out the West. And when they bring people in from the West to work with them, that's what they call sparring partners. They refer to you as a sparring partner. They will use you until they don't need you anymore, then they kick you out. And of course, we're seeing this take place on a large scale right now. Now, when it comes to the CCP offering permanent residency again to these researchers, now look, the older system of migration in the West used to be merit-based. Canada had that until just recently. The United States, again, that was the old system. That means you try to recruit people or bring people into your country who have skills that you need. People who, when they migrate here, they bring with them talents that will benefit the country. And you want those people, right? It helps your country develop. Now, the Chinese Communist Party is trying to do this, but it's a bit more complicated with them, mainly because of the Chinese Communist Party and its stated goals. For example, there was the issue of the CCP recruiting former fighter pilots from the United States and other countries to go and train Chinese fighter pilots. And the United States notably has been pushing back on this, including by putting commercial restrictions in places on flight academies the Chinese Communist Party is trying to use for this, including some they developed in South Africa. And it's also prohibiting former U.S. military service members from working with the Chinese Communist Party. And again, this ties into the bigger issue with it. If the United States and our military are training people for combat, if we're training people to be the most advanced fighting force in the world, and again, American taxpayers are funding that, and that's the future of our country, and then the people we're training leave our country and go to a stated enemy of our country, the Chinese Communist Party's stated its ambitions to overtake the United States, well, is that legal? Again, it's one of those gray areas. The United States is starting to crack down on that. And it's the same thing, notably, with civil-military fusion with China, where you might think that science and research are just, science and research. Well, for the Chinese Communist Party, that's closely tied in with its military. That's also tightly tied in with the Chinese Communist Party overall and its broader agendas. And if you, again, have researchers or individuals working on U.S. grants and then take the research they were paid to make by American taxpayers and then sell it to an American adversary, well, is that still legal? That's where this issue is right now. Now, on this note, on the issue of science and research, the United States is also now limiting the access of Chinese students, and it's over, again, concerns with national security. More Chinese students in the United States should study the humanities rather than science because of national security risks, Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell said during an event hosted by the Council on Foreign Relations think tank on June 24th.
I think there's been careful attempts now across most American universities to support continuing higher education, but to be careful about the labs, some of the activities of Chinese students. I do think it is possible to curtail and to limit certain kinds of access, and we have seen that generally, particularly in technological programs across the United States. It is also the case, frankly, I would like to see more Chinese students that are coming to the United States to study the humanities and social sciences, not particle physics.
And note that U.S. universities are now taking precautionary steps regarding Chinese students and limiting access to sensitive U.S. technology, again, according to Mr. Campbell. And note that U.S. universities have made careful attempts to support continuing higher education for Chinese students, but have also been, quote, careful about the labs, some of the activities of Chinese students, he added. Now, this is important because, again, it ties in with civil-military fusion and the way the Chinese Communist Party will actually send students to the United States to work on research projects, again, funded oftentimes by taxpayer-funded U.S. grants. And then after they're done, they go back to China and they go and work in Chinese research labs, bringing the research they did in the United States, funded by American taxpayers. And the CCP does this and even pushes for this aggressively. The Chinese Communist Party, on its end, it actually openly uses students as spies. And part of this ties in with what they call the Chinese Student and Scholar Associations, the CSSAs. Now, the CSSAs actually often get money openly from the Chinese government. A lot of times it goes to the Chinese consulates. In fact, many CSSAs even openly state it on their websites. A lot of major universities in the United States openly have Chinese student and scholar associations working there. And again, these are closely working with, closely tied to, and oftentimes even directly funded by the Chinese consulates, tied in again with the Chinese government. The CCP actively uses them. And it's actually not even just for research. The CCP actually often mobilizes the CSSAs, these Chinese student groups, for things like protests. You might have seen, for example, if Tibetans go and hold an event at a university, you'll have all these students come forward. It's been shown repeatedly, oftentimes, those are the Chinese student groups, which again are usually the CSSAs. But again, it's not just protests and things of these sorts. It's also the whole issue of industrial espionage, of economic theft, and of the Chinese Communist Party siphoning off research being funded by American taxpayers, including research done at the American universities. Now, of course, the Chinese Communist Party has a long list of other tactics and other things, and even organizations set up to siphon off American research. It's not just limited to students, not just limited to the scientific community. Recently, in fact, the United States issued a warning that Chinese investors may be targeting struggling American startups. So it's using money directly. The Financial Times said this: the U.S. National Counterintelligence and Security Center has warned technology startups that foreign adversaries, including China, are using investments to acquire sensitive data and threaten national security. And so the warning comes as Silicon Valley companies are stepping up their screening of staff and potential recruits in recent months due to the threat of Chinese espionage, and in some cases have been ordered by their American investors to turn away capital linked to China, meaning money from China is being used strategically by the CCP to steal the intellectual property. And notes the bulletin said hostile foreign groups might prey on struggling startups by taking advantage of their need for cash to gain access to intellectual property, and could obtain, it says, intellectual property data under the guise of due diligence before investing. Meaning, again, hey, we want to invest in your, imagine they're like this, we want to invest in your company. We're interested, we want to have all this money, we want to pour into it, but we need to see what you're doing. Send us what you're doing. Show us your plans. Give us a big proposal and everything you're finding, everything you're researching. Prove to us it actually works, and then we'll think about it. And so what happens, right? Well, this struggling American startup, they're trying to build a business, they're limited funds like this, they're having trouble getting by, and suddenly they get a lot of money offered to them. And so what do? Well, they get all their research, all their major findings, all their systems, and they make a big presentation and they show it to these Chinese investors. And what they do then is they give them everything these individuals ask for, and then if the Chinese investors like, thank you, but no thanks, we don't want it anymore, what happens? They just got robbed. It means that those individuals just took all their research and they're not going to pay for it, but they're probably going to pay for it in China. But also it goes beyond that, because sometimes they actually do pay for it and just recruit these individuals, again, either through the 1,000 Talents program or through the Torch program. Now, interestingly, it says that foreign threat actors could even use things like venture capital and private equity to exploit them. And this in turn threatens American economic and national security, again, because this is the Chinese Communist Party siphoning things off, siphoning off our, great minds, so to speak, in order to build up a system that the CCP is intentionally and openly saying is meant to overtake us. The Chinese Communist Party wants to replace the United States in every single industry in China, every single tech platform in China, not even just the United States. Every single thing that has any involvement from the West, needs to be replaced by something domestically developed and owned by the Chinese Communist Party. And anything brought over there eventually will be replaced because of that. Well, everyone, that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me know what you think in the comments, and also please don't forget to share this episode. Help us get the word out. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.